This tool is called In the 10. And it's a big tool. It's a very important tool. Because when we're using this tool in the 10, what it does is it's a game changer. We go to change, or we go to use a tool for change, or we go to apply some of our transformational knowledge, and we stop and we go, oh, well, we were doing it well the other day, or we've been doing it well for 3 weeks, but now I can't, and what's going on? And generally what happens if you really are conscious and you're working very hard to change, what you'll do is you'll beat yourself up and say, well, what's wrong with me? And why don't I get this? And blah, blah, blah. But the reality is many times contextually in the 10, what that means is it's changed. Now, the Pareto principles in the mechanical world, it's the 80-20 rule. And there's a lot of correlations. It says for 20% of the effort, you can get 80% of the results. So would you put in 80% of the effort to get the other 20%? You know, the law of diminishing return, for example, that's one of the ways we use the 80-20 rule. In human psychology, it's a little bit higher. It's 90-10. When we study human behavior, we see there's a pretty significant, consistent, sustainable, repeatable, break-even process point that occurs at the 90-10. 90% of the time we do one thing, 10% of the time we do another. 90% of the time we're driven by away, pain avoidance. 10% of the time we can fall into this towards pattern. 90% of the people, 10% of the people. All kinds of corollary. Why In the 10 has so much value for us is that in 90% of life, in essence, and it can go by time periods, it can go by expanded time periods, and sometimes it's compressed time periods. But in essence, on average, the bell curve of life, 90% of the time, life is really just about flow. It's about expression. It's about, creation. It's realizing itself. It's manifesting itself. It's running its course. There's all these great different words that says 90% of the time I'm doing email, I'm watching TV, I'm driving home, I'm thinking, I'm focused on this, I'm ambivalent, I'm planning to what I'm doing this weekend. It's just life moving around. Now, when I said there's bigger time frames, for instance, in the 90s, 90% of the time, life was very easy. Anybody could do anything in the 90s because life was very easy. When you run into the 10%, however, 10% of life is stress. It's could be eustress, it could be distress, but it's stress. It's intenseful. It's intense. We call it a crisis. We call it painful. But the reality is when life is challenging you, when that storm is blowing, and in essence, that's when you begin to create life. That's when life is growing. That's when the best of us rise. So we don't want to get rid of this 10%. It's just that a lot of people want to control the 10%. So sometimes this In the 10 rule takes place where, we go, gosh, I was doing great and I was eating well, or I was doing this new behavior at work or at home or in my business model. It's awesome. And then all of a sudden I ran into this brick wall. Well, it's contextual. You could be a great singer. You can know a song. You're in the unconscious competence tool. You're unconsciously awesome at this change equation. And all of a sudden, American Idol calls and says, we want you to sing at Carnegie Hall tonight. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not competent there yet. So this in the 10 place, this 10% of life, the entire 90s was in the 90s. 2001, when the markets were falling apart, 2008, fall of 2008, when the real estate crisis hit and everything fell apart. Well, we had a very long period. It wasn't a day, a week, a month. It was the bottom of the W, or the other one of the bottoms of the W in the 10 can be incredibly stressful, and you want it because that's where you're going to find your growth.